Thank you, Michael. Are we looking? These guys are working to get my slides going here. While they're doing that, I must say thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It is certainly a privilege for me to, in many ways, come back home. For those, and I'll talk about that in just a few moments, some of my history here for those of you that are not aware of that, but I'm certainly grateful to be here. It feels like home. I don't know all of you. Things have changed a little bit over the years since I've been here, but many familiar faces, and I have a deep love and passion for this area and for what the Church of God is doing here. So I'm excited to be able to share with you. And as Michael said, I'll probably say this a few times as we go on tonight and tomorrow. I'm not here as an expert. I'm not here to say, well, I've got it all figured out. I'm going to tell you what to do, go home and put in these magic steps and everything is going to turn out wonderful. But I am a fellow traveler with you who's been learning and trying to figure this stuff out, because I believe that the task that God has given us is so important that we have to figure this out and start working toward it. And so I'm very passionate in this area, done a lot of research, experience, and all, in my retirement years, which are going to be coming very, very soon, I plan on doing some more work in this area, implementing some of the stuff because of my interest in it. My topic, as you've been told, is decentralized ministry in the post-pandemic church, which sounds a little bit academic and sounds like something you might find on the title of an academic research paper, and that's not the purpose of it, isn't to sound pretentious, but there's some important content there, even the title, because we are, whether we're post-pandemic or not, I guess we'll find out. I think we're all trying to be, and maybe we're convincing ourselves that we're post-pandemic, and whether we are or not, I guess we'll find out. But we are moving in that direction. Certainly, at least emotionally, we are post-pandemic. And when we talk about decentralized ministry, we're going to talk a lot about that today and tomorrow. Tonight, we're just going to whet your appetite. If you want the real stuff, you got to come back tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to get into the detail. But to look at some ways of approaching ministry that are going to be really, really important for us as we go forward. That we can't do church the way we've always done it. Not because what we've done has been wrong, it's just that our times and our culture and our society are shifting, and we have to find ways to respond to that appropriately. And so hopefully some of the things that I can share with you are going to be significant. I'm not here to sell you anything. I'm not here also to come here to try to convince you to adopt a particular program. This isn't a box. I'm not going to say, well, take this home, and next Sunday implement it for 40 days or whatever, and do this, and all of a sudden everything's going to turn out just perfect. No, we're not. This is not that. This is to invite you to enter into a journey. And that each of your journeys may be a little bit different, and that's perfectly fine. I think the point is not, do you follow any prescribed methodology? And I'll give you some ideas, but I'm not going to give you the answers. But I'm going to give you some stuff to work on that hopefully everybody here will be able to take home. My goal is, when you leave tomorrow afternoon, and after we've gone through 4 of these sessions, everyone here will be able to take home with them something practical that they can implement. Whether you're a church of 10 or a church of 1,000 or somewhere in between, I'm going to give you some practical hooks, maybe just even a few things that are going to get your wheels turning. Hopefully, that'll help you begin to think of how you can respond more appropriately to the changing environment in which we find ourselves. So as we get started, if you go to the next slide here, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. Just to get you started, I know you know a little bit, but for those of you that don't know me, don't know my story, for the last 15, almost 15 and a half years, I have been in Washington State, and as Michael said, I've been the regional pastor of the Pacific Northwest Association of the Church of God, which is, it's always hard to pin down a number. Right now we're at 47 churches. We actually have 4 new churches, 4 new Hispanic churches that we're working with. I was just visiting one this past weekend. 4 new Hispanic churches that we're onboarding into our district over the next few months. And so it's been a great ministry, 15 and a half years. Been enjoying the experience, but just for a number of reasons, some of them personal, most of them, a lot of them personal, but also because of where God is leading me in terms of some of my passions and some of the stuff that He wants me to do. At the end of May, I'm moving into a transition, which I'll talk about in just a moment. So I've been in Washington State for the last 15 years. And I just want to share this here. I put up here a picture of the Brandenburg Gate in Berlin. And I put that there because in 2011, Kathy and I we love to go to Europe, and that particular trip was very instrumental for us in terms of making some shifts in some of the ways that we looked at our ministry and some of the ways we looked at the church. I had always been involved with trying to find ways that the church could be relevant and appropriate for our age. I was a church planter at one point, and I was involved in, some of you may be familiar with what's called the meta-church methodology, and I was doing some of that stuff. Always been kind of dabbling around in this kind of stuff. But in 2011, when we went to Europe, had just some, you have those light bulbs go on. You ever have those moments where suddenly those bulbs are on, but they're burning bright, and they're just, you can probably see it. Somebody could see it from a satellite because of how bright it is on top of your head. Well, that's how I was feeling in 2011 as I was in Europe, spending time watching to see what God was doing there, and to see how in a very postmodern, post-Christian culture, that there were new forms of church expression that were developing that were changing the landscape there. And knowing that here in North America, we're just, where Europe goes with some of this stuff, we end up following. And whether that's good or bad is just a reality. They tend to be leading at some of the cutting edge. Again, whether I'm not using that as a good or bad, but in terms of where culture moves. And to see how the church was finding new life in the midst of what might appear to be a dearth of spiritual life. And it just got me thinking, and that propelled me into all sorts of new research and looking at a lot of different things. So you'll hear maybe a few references to that from time to time. So that was 2011, and I'll tell you a little bit about what's happening this year. So at the end of May, I am retiring from my position at the Pacific Northwest Association, and we are in the process of moving back to Central California. For those of you that don't know, we have 3 sons and 5 grandchildren, all in the Central California area, mostly Fresno or Lemoore, and want to be back here and to be close to them, but also using this as an opportunity for me and for us to do some ministry and continue on some of the things. I've been doing some writing and some other work, and also involved in the development of missional communities. And we can talk more about that at some point as well. So I'm excited to be back here. In fact, my being here tonight is a way to just get reacquainted with many of you again. I'm looking forward to ways that we can just be together. I'm looking forward to that. Okay, enough of the introductory stuff. I want to introduce you to someone. This is not a theologian. Sometimes you put stuff up like this, and these are famous pastors or theologians. This guy is not a theologian or pastor. Karl Friedrich Gauss, 1777 to 1855. Does that name ring a bell to any of you? Gauss. if you're into mathematics, Gauss was one of the greatest mathematicians of all time. So there's like a number of even mathematical, I think there's like a Gaussian curve, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that is named after him. And I'm going to tell you a little story about him. But in order to do that, I am going to give you an assignment, first of all. So we're going to do something fun together. I mean, I don't know if this is going to be fun. Maybe, I don't know, did any of you actually like math? Oh, wow, that's pretty impressive. Any of you hate math? Okay, less, but whatever. Okay, we're going to do a math assignment here tonight. And just to kind of get our juices flowing, and this will keep you awake as well, because after you go through this experiment, you'll be up all night trying to figure this out. That's beside the point. Here's what I want you to do. You cannot use your calculator, if anybody even has such a thing, or your smartphone that probably has a calculator on. You can't use that. Can't use a smartwatch or a calculator. You can use, if you want, you can use a paper and a pen, or just use your brain. But I'm going to assign you for it. I'm going to give you 1 minute, and here's what I want you to do. I want you to add up all the numbers from 1 to 100. Okay, so 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. You know that? Okay? So I want you to do that. I'm going to give you 1 minute. And I want to see if any of you, how far, who can give me the answer within 1 minute. Okay, so, yeah, the answer is 5,050.
I said 5,000.
Now, you're wondering, well, how did we arrive at that? Just hold the slide for a second here. But so Gauss, the story goes, when he was an elementary student, elementary school student in Germany way back then, that in his classroom, the teacher, trying to keep the students busy, gave them this assignment and said, I want you to add up all the numbers between 1 and 100, thinking that, this will keep them busy for a long time and help them develop their math skills. Well, Gauss had it figured out within a minute. And the teacher was blown away, how in the world did you ever come up with that? How did you figure out how to add up all those numbers 1 to 100? Now, how would most of us do that? If we're going to add up numbers 1 to 100, we literally go 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5, and we just keep going on and on. Most of you can probably get up to maybe the 10, and then you can probably do that in your head possibly, and then after that it starts getting tricky. Well, what Gauss did, he saw patterns, and he saw sequences and patterns, and he was able to make sense of this just quickly. So you can go ahead and put up the screen. So here's how it works. He realized that within those 100 numbers, there are pairs. If you go from the top to the bottom and keep building pairs, each of the pairs adds up to 101. So 1 plus 100 is 101, 2 plus 99 is 101, 3 plus 98 is 101, and you just keep compressing it down. And he knew that there were all those pairs, and there's 50 of those pairs. So all he had to do was go 50 times 101 is 5,050. Okay, easy, right?
Easy peasy.
Yeah, easy. Now that you know that, it is easy, right? Reality is, though, if we're not thinking in that way, it is beyond our comprehension.
Yeah.
We limit ourselves in so many ways because we can't even imagine that there is another way to do it. In fact, it was really interesting as I was preparing for this. Because I used to be a math was never my. I was never going to be a mathematician. I was going to be an engineer at one time, so maybe I'm a little geeky at that point. But I actually came up with another way of doing this. Not as elegant as this, but another way of doing this whole thing too, which I thought was fascinating in itself. But the point is, the problems that we face in life, a lot of times we're approaching them with the same old approaches and solutions.
That's good.
And they're not giving us the results in the way we really need them. So you can go to the next slide. And so I think it comes to a point is, are we trying to solve big problems with inadequate solutions? And I think a lot of times within the church, that's how it feels like what we're doing. We've got big problems, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in just a few moments, but we've got some big problems that we're facing, but we're still trying to approach them in ways that we've always done it. And then we wonder why it's so difficult, and why it's so hard, and why we're not getting the results that we would like and that we would expect. Where really that maybe God has got something totally different for us. There's a key, there's a solution, there's a formula, and I hate to use that word formula because I know when we say that it's like we're looking for this magic program that we can plug in. But I believe that God is always working to provide us answers in ways that we might not expect.
Yeah.
But are we open to that? Or are we still going to go 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5? Because that's the only way we know how to do it.
That's good.
And so within the church, I want to encourage all of us to start to say, even if we don't know what those solutions are, recognize that there just might be some other solutions, and that we need to be at least open to discovering what those other solutions might be. So let's talk about some of the challenges. And I think I'm going to identify for you tonight what I see are 4 big challenges facing the church right now. Now, whether these are the only challenges, no. Are they maybe not the only ones, but the ones that I want to identify, because I believe for us right now, these might be the most pressing. And first of all is just the pandemic in itself. And we've just come through almost 2 years of disruption. And that is what has really happened. The church and societal life has faced tremendous disruption in the last 2 years. And I think you've heard it being said, or you've heard it said, and you'll hear it continue to be said for a while, that church life is not going to be the same as a result of what we've just been through the last years. And that's not just church life. Life, period, in our world is not going to be the same. And some of it will be the same, but there's going to be a lot of things that are going to be different. And I think within the church, there is a winnowing that is taking place. Michael mentioned earlier the fact that attendance is generally down. People are not coming back like we might expect them to. And in some ways, what that is doing, it is, and I know there's a variety of reasons why people are not coming back, and there's some that are legitimately not coming back because of health reasons. But it's also people are now making conscious choices of what they're doing, and some of the consumerism, and that'll be another topic we talk about later, some of the consumerism that has permeated the church. People now are making a choice to say, I don't really need to do that anyway. So there's people who are not coming back who probably weren't really gung ho about being there in the first place anyways. You're going to have more of a serious, committed group that's going to be sticking with you. But however you want to interpret that, I think the point is this. I believe that the pandemic may be a gift from God for us. Now, I'm not saying that God caused this just to cause just for this reason, but I do believe when these things do happen, we have to see where God could be at work. And I believe that this might be for the church one of those moments where we have an opportunity to assess and rethink and reset what it is that we need to be doing and how we need to be doing it. And so I would want to encourage all of us not just to get caught up in the frustration of what we've been experiencing the last 2 years, but to look at this and say, okay, this life is not going to be the same. Great. What are we going to do? What can we do next? What can be what is it that God really does want us to do? So let's look at the second challenge. The second challenge that I see is, and this kind of, Michael and I did not compare notes, and there's a few things we may even overlap here tonight, but is that we need to reach beyond Jerusalem. I'll pull out the scripture a little bit later, but so you're all familiar with Jesus talking about we started in Jerusalem. And Michael talked about how the church grew, and I'm going to have a map on here as well. So my map my map is maybe more complicated than his, and his was better. But besides that, the point is, and here's a reality I want to really confront you with tonight as we start thinking about this stuff. Now more than ever, we have to realize and be honest with the fact that most of our churches today, most, are not reaching beyond the evangelical subculture.
Yep.
Now, you see my little pie chart there? This is just a rough diagram here to depict kind of roughly what it's like. But if you want to look at our American culture there, and you see and you look at the whole circle, that little blue piece of the pie is basically the evangelical subculture within our country. Most of our churches are fighting over that blue piece of the pie. There's been research, a lot of research that's been done on this. 80% of church growth is transfer growth.
Yep.
10% of church growth comes from actual natural reproduction, which means babies are born. And roughly only 10% of church growth, I mean, we're talking across the board, is what you would call conversion growth.
Wow.
I mean, and those are rough figures, but there's been some studies that have been done that have demonstrated this. What does that tell you? Is that there has been, we've sometimes have deluded ourselves into thinking that we're growing, we're seeing success, when what we're really doing is, yes, we're building maybe empires, we're building buildings, we're larger, we have more mega churches now than ever, but yet, at least pre-COVID, and it's probably higher now, but pre-COVID, there were probably at least 5,000 churches a year closing in the United States each year. That what's really happening is we're seeing a consolidation of the Christian churches into larger churches, and that most of the growth. And again, I'm not saying it's always there, so we're talking in generalities. There are exceptions all over the place, but they are few and far between. Most of the church growth that is happening in America is transfer growth, not people who are coming from non-church, unchurched background. We're all fighting over this pie, this piece of the pie of people who are already easy to reach because they already know the language, they know our culture, they know the music, they know the routines, and of course we want them because they know they're going to tithe and they can provide leadership and all those other wonderful things. We don't want the messy ones. These are hard work. And so what ends up happening is we're stuck in Jerusalem. And we know we're called to go to Antioch, we're called to go to Ephesus, we're called to go to all these other places, but it's too hard to go there. So it's easier to go after the group we know how to reach. Folks, God has called us to go into all the world to preach the good news. We're stuck in Jerusalem a lot of times. And as a result, and part of it is because we're still using methods that are designed to reach church people. We have trouble reaching people who are outside of our culture and our subculture. So that is a big challenge. That one I could talk on for a long time, and I won't because we'd get stuck. Let's go to the next one. Discipleship. We need to be building followers of Jesus, not Christian consumers. And I really believe, and again, I don't know what's going on, even though I know many of you, I don't know what's going on in your local congregations here, so I'm not here to be making judgment on anyone in particular tonight. But I'm saying that it's a general principle, what has been happening, partly because of the previous slide where I was talking about how we're all competing after this same piece of the pie, that we have created a lot of great Christian consumers, not a lot of great disciples.
Yep.
People who follow Jesus passionately with their lives and are living that in a way that's also outward focused and making a difference within the world. And if more so than ever today, especially, not just because of the pandemic, but with younger generations like the Gen Zs that are coming up. And, I mean, forget millennials, they're already old. I mean, millennials we got to be thinking Gen Zs. And most of the demographers are telling us as a result of COVID and the significance of what has just happened in the last year or two, there's a new generation that's being born right now that isn't even Gen Z. We don't even have a name for them yet. Point being, these people, these younger generations, they are not at all interested in being Christian consumers. If we want to reach them more so than ever, this is an opportunity for us to call them to follow Jesus, not to train them into the consumer culture that we have created. But we could spend a lot of time on that one as well. Last point, and actually, I got my numbers here. That should be a 4 in front of global church, but forgive me for that. And I'm great to see Daniel and Christy with us and Sophie with us tonight. Good to see missionaries outside of North America who are doing tremendous work. And if you want to talk to them about what's going on in Europe or in their particular case now, Hungary, talk to them because they have a lot to be able to share. But the global church, I believe, is going to face a lot of increasing resistance in coming years, and already is. Even what's been going on the last 48 hours in Ukraine and Russia, and we're seeing things in certain places in Asia that are tightening up. There's a rejection, not just even of Christianity. It's rejection of American influence of Christianity. And we've got to be willing to look at things differently to help the global church, but also to learn from the global church, because the global church is probably going to teach us things that are going to be helpful for us. That's why my trip to Europe, our trip to Europe 11 years ago, was life-changing for me, because I could see things there that I had not seen here that I thought, wow, I can learn from that stuff. So let me say this. Our past methodologies and structures are inadequate for the challenges of today and tomorrow. Now that's, again, not to say that everything you're doing is bad. Okay, I know you're here because you love Jesus. And I know you're doing your best. You're working hard to make a difference. And I'm sure every one of you who are here could tell me tonight and tell us stories of where you see God at work. So I don't want to belittle anything where God is at work. But I do want to say that the task before us is so great, and that we can't just limit ourselves with where we're at, but we have to see that where God is wanting to take us is going to be into new territory. And just like we did with the Gaussian mathematical conundrum that I placed before you, we've got to start looking at things differently if we're going to want different results going forward. So this is now to go on to a new topic, and this is the whole thing of decentralization. We're going to get into this more tomorrow. I'm going to spend, especially in our morning sessions, I'm going to present some stuff to you that I think you'll find, especially in the first session in the morning, even some fascinating stuff that I think you'll find really interesting. But there is something we can learn about decentralization. And decentralization is essentially where we're recognizing that we are living now in a world not so much of this top-down hierarchical orders where everything is nice and neat and orderly and everything flows through centers. Because that's the way we function in these nice pyramid-shaped organizational structures where everything flows top-down, everything's controlled from the top, and everything's run. That we live in a world now where everything is dispersed. And if you want the best example of that, it's here on your computer or your laptop, whatever it is. The internet is the perfect example of a decentralized system. And those systems are not just like technologies that connect us through wires or wirelessly. Those are systems that are changing our culture at a deep level, whether it's education, whether it is relationships, and certainly our economy. I mean, I don't know how many of you are into things like blockchain and cryptocurrency and all this stuff. Some of the stuff I know sounds scary, and some of it might be just plain weird, and some of it is. But the point is that orientation is being wired into our very lives and into our social structures.
Yep.
And I'm going to propose to you, and I'll get into this a little bit tomorrow, but I'm going to start a little bit on that tonight, is to say this: that it was decentralization of this nature that allowed the gospel to flourish in the first century.
Yep.
In fact, again, Michael, you and I didn't talk before, but what you said ties in well, because the examples that we can learn from what took place in the New Testament church are tremendous for what we can learn from today. And see, we'll go back to that previous one here, that red diagram there. You got this big red ball and these little things coming out. That's a centralized structure. Everything rotates around what happens at the center. And that's how most of us have been running our churches. We've got this center, and then we have these little programs and things that spawn off of that. And you know what happens when we become centralized? It's one of the reasons we stop growing and we hit limits. Because even as pastors, you can only handle so many people. Your span of care is only so great.
Yeah.
We only have so many financial resources. We get frustrated and we say, well, why can't we start new churches? Because the way we do church it requires so much human power and financial investment that we don't have enough to do it that way. But if we see the possibilities of working decentralized, where we have a whole bunch of these different hubs and nodes that are all over the place, but they're interconnected with each other, then suddenly there's strength, and there's the ability to move with fluidity and with tremendous efficiency. Again, some of this stuff we'll talk more about tomorrow. But decentralization, I believe, could be a significant answer for us within the church as we look ahead to what is next. So let's go to the next screen. So, how I would define decentralization for our purpose is empowering and unleashing ministry across the church. How is the whole purpose of decentralization, is the whole idea of empowering, where we want to recognize that in a centralized system, we're afraid to empower people because they might do something that might step outside the bounds. We're afraid that they might teach something wrong or do something bad, and therefore we want to control them.
Yeah.
We want to empower ministry. We want with accountability, but we want to empower it, and we want to unleash people to do God's work wherever it is. And in centralized systems, we tend to restrict that in many ways. So let's go on to the next slide here. I want to talk a little bit about the first century church again as well, as we we need to wrap this up. But the first century church experienced massive reach and growth because it took advantage of the decentralized networks of its time. And if you look at Galatians 4, I love this verse here. Sometimes we bring out at Christmas time because it talks about the incarnation of Jesus. But there's something significant with this verse where Paul is writing to the Galatians. But when the fullness of time had come, God sent His Son. Jesus coming when He did it wasn't. We're pretty sure it wasn't 0 AD. It was probably like 5 BC or 8 BC, but that's an academic discussion beyond our purpose tonight. But when Jesus came, It was not just a random, let's do it now. It was part of God's, I believe, God's design, because it was a perfect time where God could break into human history, not just through Jesus, but that the message of Jesus could be transmitted with tremendous power and potency. And of course, I'll bring up that verse that we had talked about earlier. You will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria to the ends of the earth. It's a call. It was a call to the church to take this message of Jesus to the world. But the reason they could do it is because of the decentralized social structure that existed for the first time in human history at that point. The ancient world was very much top-down centralized. But the Greeks and the Greco-Roman culture, and again, we're getting into this tomorrow morning, had social structures that enabled the gospel to spread like wildfire. Where the Holy Spirit, with what was shared earlier, with the power of the Holy Spirit coupled with this fluid, open social structure that existed, this thing could just move. It's like you can light a fire, but if the grass is wet, it's not going too far. But if that's dry and if it's ready to burn, wow, watch it go. And of course, here's my attempt at a map. It's too messy, you can't see it. But the point being, here's the point. The gospel spread like it had never before in human history. And there are a lot of reasons for it. Certainly one of them being the decentralized social structures that existed at its time. I want to share with you a quote from Josh Packard, who's a Christian sociologist. And this I just heard this literally within the last, probably within the last month. And I've really been thinking a lot about this. He was talking about the fact that for this time and generation, there's low institutional trust in our world. And especially among younger generations that are not at all impressed with the things that some of us older people are, the buildings and the programs and the institutions. He's saying what we have to do now is relationships at scale, not buildings, programs, and institutions at scale. And having been around the church environment, having been a church planter myself, having been involved in regional ministry, so I'm wired to think of how do we organize the structure stuff from a centralized perspective. We have spent way too much time and we have measured too much on can we get buildings in place, and again, not against buildings, I'm not against budgets or anything of that nature, but I am saying is that we're scaling the wrong things. If we scale the relationships that allow the gospel to transmit, we can take care of those other things very easily. We can take care of the buildings and the programs and institutions. But if we build disciples, people who follow Christ with passion and with fervor and who give their lives to following Jesus and sharing the good news of Jesus, and we can scale that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Come on, preach that.
And that's what I want to encourage us, is to be beginning to think, how can we scale relationships? And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow morning. We're going to talk about how do we begin within the church to reframe some of the things that we do so that relationships are at the core of that, so that we can begin to allow the gospel to be permeated not only into our personal lives but into our community lives and as a result within our society. So that's kind of where we're at, and I'm going to leave it at that for tonight. That's just to get you going, just to get you thinking, and certainly we're going to have tomorrow, the way it's structured is I'll give presentations, there will be time for Q&A, but I'm looking forward to the journey. And as I was preparing for this, I was realizing in 4 sessions, there is no way I could cover everything. So I'm going to try to hit some highlights, give you some things to ponder and consider. And I'm not here to tell you that I've got all the answers, because I want to hear some of the ideas that you have. And I'd love to hear some of your interaction on some of this as well. So hopefully tonight, as you are, hopefully you don't sleep, because hopefully you're going to be processing this stuff in your mind. Well, first of all, you're going to be trying to figure out that math question. And once you figure that out, you're going to be trying to figure out how do we scale relationships for the kingdom. And I want you to sleep. But if you don't sleep for the reason of trying to figure this other stuff out, then I'd be okay with that as well. So anyways, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in the morning.
That fancy widget will turn me on. I'll just keep talking and then I'll get really loud. Thanks for taking the time to be here. Thank you for slogging the way through 2 messages with lasagna sitting in your belly. Well done. Thank you for traveling from Exeter and from Fresno and Tulare and Madera. You had an easy drive this time. Thank you for making the trek, each one of you. We will be back together. Doors will be open and kind of the registration table will be ready for 8:30. We'll kick things off at 9 o'clock. We'll have a worship set. There'll be multiple sessions like Lloyd had talked about where he will be speaking, but also we'll be opening things up for Q&A time. It's going to be wonderful. We'll have lunch together on the menu tomorrow, and then we'll wrap up somewhere, if I'm remembering correctly, around the 2:30 time frame, and then we'll roll into our business meeting. So just to give you an idea of where things are headed that way. Let me just close us out in prayer, and then I'll release you guys that way. Father, I thank you for your abiding presence here in this room. I'm thinking about the ministry milestones we will be celebrating tomorrow. Pastors that have been serving and ordained for 45 years. Thank you for the history and the rootedness in this room. But thank you for the fresh things that you're doing. Through all the disruption, through all the frustration, through not being able to solve math problems, not understanding how to scale relationships, we trust you. Will you help us bridge that rootedness and the new freshness together to do great and mighty things for your name's sake? In Jesus' name, amen.